you're a British apple grower and you're struggling. You have to sell your apples for £1 a kilo to make a profit. But French apple growers, they can charge less. That makes it hard for you to compete. So let's say the government then decides to step in and slap a tariff on French apples. A tariff is just a tax that an importer has to pay to the government if they want to bring in apples from another country, in this case, from France. Because of that tariff, the price of French apples has now risen. And now British farmers can raise their prices and still be cheaper than their foreign rivals. Local apples are more competitive, so the thinking goes that many people will buy them instead. With less foreign competition and higher prices, British growers should be able to increase their profits, safeguarding local jobs and stimulating the economy. That's good news, isn't it? Not for everyone. Imagine your best friend is in the smoothie business. She relies on a supply chain to put her product together. She buys strawberries from Spain, bananas from Costa Rica, and apples from France. But these new tariffs mean her French apples have gone up in price. They used to be 80p a kilo, but the tariffs mean they're now £1.20, and British apples have gone up in price too. Either way, her business costs have gone up, and she'll probably pass this on to you, the consumer, so you're paying more for your smoothie. It's easy to see how tariffs can lead to higher prices for all kinds of goods, so there are always winners and losers when they're introduced. It's also likely that France will be unhappy about the UK's new apple tariff, and will hit back with some of their own. That means if our British apple farmer was looking to sell across the channel, they might struggle to keep up with the local competition. So why do it in the first place? Many economists are against tariffs. They think free trade, where there are no tariffs, promotes economic growth. Since the 1930s, we've seen lower tariffs around the world with more consumer choice and a more globalised economy. But others aren't sure free trade is all it's cracked up to be. Remember that without tariffs, your apple business could go bust and all your staff would be out of work, thanks to cheaper imports from abroad. And what if the thing companies are producing is critical to national security, like weapons or nuclear materials? Would we want those firms going out of business?
USA,
The American president, Donald Trump,
China,
has slapped tariffs on imports from China to help American manufacturers survive against what he calls unfair competition. China has hit back, sparking a full-blown trade war. So governments use tariffs for all kinds of reasons, to protect domestic industries, raise more tax revenue, or punish other countries if they think their manufacturers aren't competing fairly. But what's this got to do with Brexit? At the moment, Britain can't slap tariffs on French apples because both countries are in the EU. It's a free trade zone, which means no tariffs on goods traded between member states. We're also in a customs union. That means members have a common tariff on goods that enter the union. Put simply, a French company importing goods from outside the EU, from, let's say, China, has to pay the same tariffs as a British company importing the same products from China. After Brexit, Britain might have more freedom to set its own tariffs, depending on what kind of withdrawal agreement we negotiate with Brussels. Well, if there is an agreement, that is. What if there's no deal? Even if there's no deal, it won't be a free-for-all.
Queensberry rules, old boy.
With Britain wading into trade wars with the rest of the world, there are rules on tariffs set out by the World Trade Organization, aka the WTO. But things could get difficult. EU countries importing British goods will have to start paying tariffs, making our goods less attractive. And remember that at the moment, the EU is our biggest trading partner by a long way. If we hit back with tariffs on EU imports, that would mean price rises in the shops over here. We could decide not to introduce tariffs to keep prices down, but then British businesses selling to British customers might find themselves undercut by companies from around the world. So we wouldn't be competing on a level playing field. And there's another complication. We're asking other countries in the WTO to trade with us on very similar terms to when we were in the EU. But our trading partners might object to this and ask for better terms, because now they're trading directly with the UK, a country with a much smaller population than the EU, and therefore with a much smaller market for imports. Some Brexiteers think there might be an upside to going back to WTO rules, because Britain will be able to make independent trade deals with countries like the United States, and we won't have to follow the rules of the European Court of Justice. But there's a whole other potential world of pain out there. Tariffs are just one type of trade barrier. There are all kinds of other things that can make trade more difficult and expensive, like countries demanding that British manufacturers meet certain quality standards and follow safety regulations. Outside the EU, there could be more border checks, more paperwork, higher costs for businesses, all things that could hit their profits and lead to higher prices for you, the consumer. That's why many leading economists, including the Governor of the Bank of England, think a no-deal scenario will seriously damage the economy. For decades, we haven't really had to think about tariffs. That's because Britain was in the EU and supporters of free trade were in the White House. But now both those things are changing, which is why we needed to have this little chat. So no, tariffs aren't sexy, but you've got to get used to hearing about them because they're going to be popping up in headlines everywhere. Thank you so much for watching. And who'd have thought we'd all be here at the end of a video about tariffs? If you like this, you should take a look at our video about what happens when the